We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
Hello, this is Tika Lark Fleming, and this is December 4th edition of the Blk Grrrl Show. We've had a lot of exciting things going on today. We're going to have Gary Dauphine as our guest. But first, we're going to do the Breaking the Table. And the Breaking the Table this week is called Racism is Not a Black Problem. I stopped being friends with a liberal white woman who felt she needed to tell me that her son used the word nigger. And then when I explained I wasn't happy, was offended that I called her and her sons racist. She is a liberal. She is an environmentalist. She is a great example of what black people don't need from white liberal allies. What we don't need. Your opinion on the word nigger. It's not your business. What we don't need. White people going into black churches and black neighborhoods chanting "fuck the police" in front of our elders. What we don't need. White people who tell us Mike Brown, Eric Garner, Renisha McBride, and Taisha Miller's murders are horrible. Yeah, we know that. We don't need you randomly coming up to us at our offices and our workplaces offering your condolences. What we don't need. White people who view us as pets. What we don't need. White people who need us to be their black legitimacy. What we don't need. White people explain to us what the real problem is, which is usually goes into class and capitalism. Guess what? I read Marx in college too, and that's actually not what he said. What we do need are white people going to white politicians, white organizations, and white communities and challenging white people's support of institutional racism by saying nothing. Saying nothing supports institutional racism. We don't need white people in Leimert Park or Compton or Inglewood or Crenshaw. We need you to do work in Santa Monica, Sherman Oaks, Los Feliz, Beverly Hills, Glendale, West Hollywood, and the West Side. We need white people in white churches and synagogues holding up signs that say, "fuck the police." We need you in front of Garcetti's house. We need you in front of the 3 supervisors who voted no for a civilian oversight of the LA County Sheriff. You know, Don Nabe, Antonovich, and Yoroslavsky. We need you to stay on cue. If every liberal civil rights policy depends on the East Side Supervisor Solis and the South LA Supervisor Ridley Thomas, which is 2 out of 4, then we'll never get anything passed if the white community doesn't hold their politicians accountable. We need white people at MoCA, the LA Times, NPR. We need white people to ask, why do you support racism by excluding the diversity of voices and ideas? We need white people planning marches in white suburbia and gated white communities, if marching is what white people want to do. South Central LA is not a hobby. You need to go where your parents live, your grandparents live, and you need to talk to them. We need white people to challenge racism amongst their friends. We need white organizations to be diverse because it's right, not because it's easier for you to get funding if you have some color on your website photos. And I have been to many meetings where they talked about needing black and Latino so they can get funding. So let's not act like that's not happening, because it is. Black people don't need white people telling us what we already know. I don't want to speak to you about racism. You know what it is. People who look like me aren't oppressing people, so why talk to me? I also don't want to talk to the white press about my feelings. The white press needs to push a little bit harder and ask the white community how it feels about this, and how it feels about the murders, and how it feels about institutional racism. And if it feels nothing, then they need to write that, then challenge that indifference and apathy, and then ask again. White people yelling in a black church with 70 and 80-year-old parishioners is doing nothing but interrupting the one place that people who lived through Jim Crow and was born in legally segregated U.S. have for peace. Racism isn't a black problem. Racism is a white supremacy problem. And if you're white and you view yourself as an ally, until you're ready to deal with that, I have zero interest in anything that you have to say. So that was Breaking the Table. So we're going to have a little bit of a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some things that will be going on in the Los Angeles area, and we'll be talking to Gary. So thank you.
You were 19 years old with your whole life ahead, and with 23 bullets, 4 cops shot you dead. Yeah, you sat in your car, anesthesia took.
Okay. All right, I'm back. I want to let you guys know some things that are going on. One thing that's going on is the Remote Area Medical RAM is going to be having a screening tomorrow, and they're the organization that had to actually come to Los Angeles and come to the urban, come to different communities in Los Angeles, because before we had healthcare, before we had ACA. But I will be on a panel at Limley on Friday, and I'll put that information on the website to talk about different healthcare issues. And actually, I'm going to be bringing up single payer because I feel like our healthcare system can be a little bit better. The one thing that I kind of do want to talk about before I talk to Gary is we want to talk about the Eric Garner case and the Mike Brown case and Ferguson and what the problems are, and we want to talk about the things as far as it regards to the cameras on the police officers. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with them having cameras on the police because I feel like we're signing up for another layer of surveillance. I don't see how this can help us with the police having cameras. I feel if you gave Cop Watch a big old wad of money and told them they could have cameras, then that would be a little bit different. But the problem really is not just, even though people getting beaten and murdered by the police is a problem, but to me, not getting beaten, not being murdered, that is a low gutter standard. For me, if you want to provide rights for people, you have to start at a higher level. I think black people deserve more than just to not be killed. One thing that we need to talk about is the 14th Amendment. And I'm going to actually read about the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment, it was actually a response to the Black Codes. The Black Codes were a separate group of laws for black people. Black people couldn't be in the streets. Black people couldn't not have a job. Black people couldn't just pretty much. Black people couldn't do what white people did. So it was a different set of laws for black people to control black people. And the 14th Amendment was actually specifically for black people. Of course, it was used in other cases later on in order to support our rights. But in the cases of Eric Garner, Mike Brown, Taisha Miller, the problem was the 14th Amendment is being violated. People talk about the various different amendments that are violated, different constitutional rights. Well, the rights that are regularly violated in regards to black people are the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment means that you get equal protection under the law, and there's equal enforcement of the law, and you shouldn't be getting harsher penalties. The drug war in the 1986 drug war was a 14th Amendment violation, in my opinion, because crack was given a higher penalty than cocaine. A lot of people don't know this, but cocaine and heroin will not get you jail time. One joint before they changed it, well, before they're slowly changing it now, but the problem with the drug laws in 1986 was that they made it so crack and marijuana became a jailable offense. Do you know if you have cocaine or heroin on you, you do not go to jail? That is specifically for crack and marijuana. That's why a lot of times when they see these movie stars, a lot of people who are black or even just people in general, they're like, well, why did my cousin go to jail for having a joint on him, but this movie star has cocaine and they're let out? Well, because cocaine, having a little bit of cocaine on you is not against the law. That the law was made specifically to penalize black people. So that's kind of like, I'm kind of getting a little bit off track, but the 14th Amendment is addressing those things. And the issue with these different stops and different murders is that they continually violate black people's 14th Amendment rights by stopping them for reasons that they would not stop a white person for. So incidents that happen shouldn't even be happening. The Eric Garner incident shouldn't have happened because chances are, if he were white, they wouldn't have stopped him for selling cigarettes. They overly enforced that because he was a black man, which was a violation of his 14th Amendment rights. Mike Brown, they bothered him because he was a black man. And this is a problem. And until we address that, cameras aren't going to do anything, because what you're going to catch on camera are police breaking the law nicely. And breaking the law nicely does not necessarily mean that your rights are not being violated. Your rights are being violated way before the police beat you, shoot you, and do all kind of other things to you. So those are some of the challenges. I'm actually going to hope that get some phone calls so people can give me some opinions on regards to Ferguson and on regards to things that are happening going on in our city. Another challenge is we have these local people who are, local politicians that are making laws that are violating the Constitution, and we're letting those laws stand. Laws such as the gang injunction. The gang injunction pretty much says we're going to ignore the Constitution. We're going to ignore the Constitution, and we are going to search people without probable cause. We're going to stop people. We're going to stop people from assembling because they are black. Inglewood's gang injunction has actually no specific gang in general. It just pretty much says if you're more than 3 people and you're hanging out, we can stop you, which is a violation of the Constitution. So when you vote for gang injunctions, you're voting to violate the Constitution. And the reason why I find this really challenging is because the same people that will march for the murders of people, the murders of black people by the police officers, have done nothing in regards to gang injunctions in regards to Los Angeles. That's a very serious issue. You're pretty much allowing the police to murder people in your community because they fit the description of just people. Because you don't have to actually be in a gang. What a gang is not necessarily it's just 3 people hanging out. So we have a caller on the line. Caller, this is hello. And what's your name and what city are you calling from?
I'm calling from Austin, Texas, and my name is Maria Holt.
Oh, hello, Maria. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great.
All things considered.
Yeah.
I have not a question, but more of a comment. I saw a little segment on some news show recently about California utilizing prisoners to fight wildfires. And I know that prison reform is of course, it's a crucial issue for us. But how do you think, overall, we know the school to prison pipeline, and we know that there's over-policing of black and inner city areas. But in California in particular, do you feel that the justice system is choosing to use prisoners and prisoners of color in order to offset budget shortfalls in areas where they may be lacking?
That's a good question. I feel that a lot of times people do talk about the prison profit in regards to why they're putting people in jail. And while I feel that has a portion to do with it, I feel that since slavery, they've been putting more and more people in jail. It's kind of just been, you can actually look at from the time they freed black people who were no longer slaves, 10 times as many people, like every 20 years, it's like 10 times more people in jail. So
like slavery by another name.
Yeah, it's like slavery by another name. So yes, it is in some parts because of money, but in some parts it's not necessarily because of money. I think it's kind of like a happy coincidence, a happy symptom, a happy like little side effect of the prison profit industrial complex. But I don't necessarily think that's the main reason why they're keeping people in jail. That's not the only reason.
What do you think the main reason? Well, I don't think it's the only, but I think that California is an example of it. Years ago, I don't remember, it was a radio talk show. I want to say it was like somebody like one of these Tom Joyner morning shows, but there's a guy that commented on there, and he brought up something that I thought was just really, really, really ballsy. He said, all of these mega churches with all of their money, imagine if one of them actually wanted to do something constructive and bought one of these for-profit prisons and really turned some lives around. It just blew me away. It's just the way he said it. But, you think about it, it is a business, but imagine if someone that actually wanted to do some reform and not just using these people as slave labor were to actually take that and help these people reshape their lives. We know that prison is not about rehabilitation. We know it's about retribution. So they're locking us up because, in my opinion, because they can't enslave us. Basically because slavery isn't legal, it's not just profit, we're just going to lock your asses up, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that's, that's a solution, but I think one of the solutions is just getting rid of the whole prison system in in America. I just feel that you can't make a system that's built on oppressing people. You can't make it better. No matter who owns it, it's going to be a horrible thing, whether it's a church, the state, But thank you so much for giving us a call, Maria. And I appreciate you calling from Texas. Okay, and we'll have one more caller. Yes, caller, your name and the city that you're calling from.
This is Sharon calling from Los Angeles.
Oh, hello, Sharon.
Hi there.
Yes, and what's your question, Sharon?
Oh, is this Tika?
Yes, this is Tika.
Okay, so I wanted to comment on what the first caller was talking about private prisons, and to say that for-profit prisons run counter to public policy. They are incentivized to increase the prison rolls. Mm-hmm. In fact, the Corrections Corporation of America and GEO, two of the largest for-profit prison corporations, have had shareholder meetings where they have assured their shareholders that an investment in a for-profit prison is a safe investment because they can almost guarantee that the beds will be filled due to recidivism. Mm-hmm. So they're incentivized to encourage things that weren't necessarily the types of violations that would result in prison time. Mm-hmm. Well, these organizations lobby Congress and lobby policymakers to change laws so that the prison cells can remain full and so that we can continue to build more prisons. So this runs completely counter to what's in the best interest of the public.
And I mean that is a huge problem, and the private prisons are awful. But I think it's a mistake for us to just focus on that, because I think we're kind of thinking that if we got rid of private prisons, then everything would be fine. And I think that's not the root cause of the increase of people in prisons. I think the root cause is several things. And while, like I said, the private prison industrial complex, I think, yes, that's something that should be looked at, and it's an important thing. But I think it's a mistake to kind of think it's just that. Somebody actually wrote a book on that, and it was really fascinating. Her name was, I'm trying to think what her name was, but she wrote a book on it. Is it Ruth Gilmore? Is that who it is?
Yeah,
yes, Ruth Gilmore Wilson.
Golden Gulag.
Yes, Golden
the name
Gulag.
Of the book is the Golden Gulag.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. The point that I was making does not counter your position. In fact, I agree with your position and think that the underlying cause and what it is that is driving it's the pathological nature of the United States in respect to the relationship with the black man and black people in general. And this dates back to slavery. I wrote an article called 400 Years of Slavery. And if you look at slavery and look at the evolution of slavery, it was abolished in 1865. We moved on to the black codes. We moved on to convict leasing. We moved on to sharecropping, Jim Crow, the new Jim Crow, modern day lynching. So these are all symptomatic of a much deeper pathological problem that the United States was born with.
Yes, yes.
And so for-profit prisons, whether we have them or don't have them, is not going to correct the much deeper problem, which is driving this for-profit prison.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Sharon, for thank you so much for giving us a call in from Los Angeles. Now
Thank you, Tika.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So right now we're actually we're gonna talk to our friend Gary. Let me give Gary's great little bio. I actually just know you, Gary. So I'll just
you can make this one up.
I can make it up. He's really cool. No, I'm just kidding. You worked at Black Voices, Black Planet, Africana. You've written for Village Voice, Vibe, Essence. You worked at KCET. You worked, let's see here, you managed websites at NPR. You're from New York.
I'm from New York.
You're
yes.
from New York,
Yeah.
And you've done lots of things.
I've done a few things.
Because my engineer was asking, she was like, "So what does Gary do?" I'm like, "He's a writer." Is that what you are? That would be who you'd want to be, a writer?
That's what I want to be when I grow up. But I guess right now, what do I do? I guess right now I'm mostly an editor and a product manager. So
Yeah.
I work at USC right now, and
Okay.
I basically build websites for the Annenberg School, the Journalism and Communication School. So
Oh, I should have you build me. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I have
we
a
can talk,
website.
we talk.
It had to be for free though. I have
Right.
no money. Okay, we're gonna kind of I'm gonna kind of ask you a light question,
Sure,
and then we're gonna
sure.
go into a more harsh reality of this horrible week, or actually month. What's your favorite movie and why?
My favorite movie and why? That's a hard question because it changes over time.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, well, I guess my favorite movie of the last couple of months is Snowpiercer.
Oh,
Have
okay.
you seen Snowpiercer?
I have not seen it.
You should see Snowpiercer. It's basically directed by a Korean director, and it's kind of a Brazil or City of Lost Children style fantasy about what happens after climate change goes terribly awry. So
That's
it's kind of interesting.
That does sound
Yeah.
like a fun movie.
It is kind of fun. It's a little dark and depressing, but with an uplifting message at the end. But
Yeah.
But that's my favorite movie this week, at least.
That's your favorite movie this week.
Yeah.
No, you introduced me to one of my top 10 favorite movies,
Which is
Ganja and Hess.
Yes, that's actually that's a favorite top 20 movie of life for me. So
Yes, yeah. Ganja and Hess is a kind of a vampire.
yep.
I guess it is Afrofuturism, kind of sci-fi, but not exactly sci-fi. You're thinking when you think sci-fi, what would you call it?
It's kind of it's in that Afro speculative mode.
Yeah.
Some people call it a little Afro surreal. I mean, it's really
Afro surreal. I would call it that. That's a good thing to call.
I mean, it's definitely like a kind of black independent avant-garde film. Director was Bill Gunn. Made it. I'm blanking on the year, but in the early 70s, and it's just an incredibly beautiful piece of filmmaking, and actually, really interesting film in terms of depictions of the church, depictions of religious fervor and religious feeling, and also addiction, and made at a really early stage of basically, I think the studio that funded it thought they were getting a blaxploitation flick, and instead they got this weird art film.
It's very artsy.
Yep. And so I'm glad you liked it.
Oh yeah, I'm always talking about that movie. I bring it up like way too much now, but because I kind of like the clothes in it too. I like the whole fashion thing. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna try to do that for Halloween, but no one's gonna get it except for Gary.
Spike has remade that movie.
Really?
Yeah. So the Spike's The Blood of Jesus, the Kickstarter that he did, is actually essentially a remake of Ganja and Hess.
I'm excited about that. I'm totally gonna see that then.
Yes. I love Spike, but
You're kind of scared?
I'm worried. I'm a little worried.
Because it's going to be really long. It's going to probably be like a 5-hour version of that movie, right?
Not, it's I don't understand. I guess I do understand the impulse to remake a great movie, but I think some things should just be left alone.
Yes, I do understand that. You kind of wonder, like, why do you... Never mind. I'm not going to even go into that. So, you were one of the first... were you the founding editor or one of the first editors of Black Planet?
Well, I was the first editor. So I started out working... This is a way back when story, but I was working at the Village Voice, working at Vibe actually, and in 1999, a buddy of mine, Omar Wasso, who was one of the senior managers there, said, "Hey, do you want to come work on this web product that we're launching called BlackPlanet.com?" Mm-hmm. And at the time, Black Planet, the folks who actually owned Black Planet, they owned another ethnic website called Asian Avenue.
Yeah, I remember that. I thought Asian Avenue came after Black Planet.
No, Asian Avenue came first.
Really?
Avenue came first, yes. And the group that owned that company, mostly Asian and Latino, had built what was a really amazing piece of software in terms of a community platform that was very unlike anything that existed at the time. And they had great success with it with the Asian American market, but they started thinking, we need to target bigger ethnic markets or bigger communities. So they did Black Planet, and then they also did a site called Mi Gente, which was going to be their Latino site, but BP was the biggest one of the group.
I loved Black Planet. You probably threw me off Black Planet at some point. You probably, that's where I start. That's where I learned how to flame people. That's where I learned how to get thrown off the internet was Black Planet. I was awful there. I was horrible.
You were? Yeah,
I was really horrible.
It's all coming back to me now. So.
Black Planet, for those of you who do not know, it was a website for Black people, and it was kind of like Facebook, but it wasn't exactly like Facebook, and people would have little topics, and then people would talk about the various topics, and some people would, but it was really fun. It was a really fun little website. So,
It was for me, to be totally honest, it was a transformative experience in the sense that was the first web property that I managed, and it was pretty successful. I mean, at one point, BP was a top 500 site globally in terms of time spent, page views, and the experience of basically working on a team like that on your first product was a great education. It's kind of like winning the World Series in your rookie year. So it was a great transformative experience for me. I met a lot of great people, learned a lot about how to build websites, learned a lot actually about ethnic websites, the ethnic business, learned some good things and some bad things. But and actually, BP predated Facebook. I guess back then,
it did.
Predated Friendster too. I think
it did because I was on the internet like way. I was like I was a power end user from like when I was like in high school. Like I started using the internet, right in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Black community online at that period, I mean, obviously, if there were use groups on Usenet, so there was the Afrofuturism listserv, which I don't know. I don't know if you're ever on that, but Alondra Nelson. And some other folks used to run a listserv called Afrofuturism. There was a site called Cafe Los Negros that was in New York. And actually, Omar Wasso, he started out with a site called New York Online, which targeted sort of Brooklyn hipsters, buppies in Brooklyn in the late 90s. So
you're like I'm kind of like I gave you the title of Godfather of Black Twitter.
I would say I got a good friend of mine who often tells me that my Twitter game is terrible. So I'm an older generation, so unfortunately, I'm not very good at Twitter.
But yeah, we'll talk about that.
I don't have the right gene or muscle to really be good at Twitter.
Well, we're going to talk to you in a little bit. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to talk to you some more about Black Twitter and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Looking forward to it.
Okay.
It's working. It's working. It's working. Baby, it's working. It's working. It's working. It's working. This is kinda clock Shash and cash, where does the truth lie? As the youth cries, hate subsides. The planet is terrorized, leaving no place to hide from that third eye.
Downward.
God is a mirror in the
For choosing
sky.
the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
It started out like a totally normal day.
I love you.
I mean, I guess I was a little sweaty and I was definitely sore. I thought I had gas. Turns out I was having a heart attack. Heart disease is the #1 killer of American women. So now I take care of myself and tell the other women in my life to do the same. Make it your mission to save your life and the lives of the women you love. Find out more from the American Heart Association at goredforwomen.org.
Hey everybody, it's your man Sabir Bey back on your airwaves, inviting you to join us every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the Sabir Bey Show, discussing history, law, and hip-hop. Every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, the Sabir Bey Show, exclusively on latalklive.com. You also can catch us on iTunes Radio and R&B, Live 365, Radio Flag, and now Stitcher Radio. Or watch us and listen directly at latalklive.com. Reality radio, handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
I should have stayed at margins where the people are friendly, where the music is warm and the beer is cold.
We're back with MPC Presents the Black Grrrl Show. You can catch us on iTunes Radio R&B, Radio 365, and on LA Talk Live. We're back with Gary.
Hey.
And we're going to ask him some more questions. So, how do you feel, even though you said, you're on Twitter, you're on there, I see you on Twitter sometimes. Yes. You just don't do it like as much as people like myself. You're not like me, like obsessive. You're not obsessive about Twitter and Facebook. I have like 3,000 accounts.
No, I do not.
So, how do you think that, because I really do think Black Planet was political. I never talked about, when I was on Black Planet, I never talked about music or movies. Pretty much everything I talked about was political, was very political. My whole online life has been very political. So how do you feel that Black Planet and Black Twitter, I mean, like, how do you think that electronic Black life has changed from like the 90s to now?
Well, I mean, I think the main thing is that it's just grown exponentially. I mean, Black Planet it's a great name. It was a great logo, but it also contained this conceit that you could have a site that could contain the entire Black digital universe, which in 1999 wasn't crazy. I mean, if you think about what you have now, there are a million blogs. There are things like Twitter. There's Facebook. That secondary universe of individuals who are sharing content, echoing, talking to each other, didn't really exist, in 1999. And so the main thing is that this idea that you could have a portal that would be the singular destination and that would encompass, the entire Black internet. No one would even, talk about trying to build something like that today, just because there's too much stuff. Like you can't really encompass it all. But at the same time, the idea of creating a space like that, I think it was inherently political. I mean, the idea of building spaces that are, for and by and about. There are very few spaces like that. Even though Black Planet was part of a network of sites, it was part of a network of sites that were about identity. It's not like being owned by Viacom or another media conglomerate. And it was part of this, sort of this notion of multicultural solidarity, the idea that people of color online had common interests, common goals, and could be part of a family of communication platforms. I think that was inherently political. In the long run, it turned out not to be necessarily a business. So, I mean, BP, when we launched BP, the goal of Black Planet was to really be an aggregator of audience that could then be monetized, in traditional ways, whether it's advertising, relationships, that kind of thing. And in order to do that, we built, I worked there as an editor. We had an editorial team. We had writers, we had editors. It turned out that people were much more interested in each other than they were in us. And so BP was, very quickly pretty notorious as a place where people would, for dating and for meeting, and B, a place where there was a lot of images that, were not, let's say, family friendly on the site. In 1999, it was not, there were not as many places for you to upload photographs. And so I had a team, if I had 6 or 7 people working for me, the folks in member services whose job was to go in and take care of troublemakers, that team was maybe 15 or 16 people. And so the organization was at one point was at a crossroads where it's had to figure out how it's going to move forward, and it decided to invest in dating, which was actually what saved the company, because dating was a great business. Rather than trying to fight, the impulse of the group, it would say, let's find a way to turn this to our benefit. So BP Dating launched, and BP Dating was probably, I think it was one of the first, for a long time, was definitely one of the biggest African American targeted dating sites.
I totally missed that. Like
you were, you said, I don't need to pay $19 a month to take advantage of this. I gotta say, the thing about Black Planet was that we used to say it was a site for African Americans and their admirers, because at any given moment, 30% of the profiles were obviously not black folks. So the site was a great engine for bringing people together. It wasn't necessarily always a great engine for content delivery, for articles, for news. But it was pretty early in the cycle, and I think there are a lot of things that when you look at something like Facebook or you look at Twitter, those platforms do content delivery really well. Black Planet did not necessarily do content delivery very well. So.
Well, you've been in journalism for a long time,
right?
And you were more so kind of like you were in black journalism for a little bit, and you were also in mainstream or white journalism.
Yep.
So, what do you think is more important, if for us to have our own media, or that we work in the white media? What do you think is more important?
Well, I'll say I'll cheat a little bit and say, most of my experience in the white media was in what used to be called the alternative media. So
yes.
I started out the Village Voice when that meant something.
Yeah, when it was the
Village Voice, yeah. The alternative weeklies, which include LA Weekly, all the weekly, every city had a very beloved and venerable weekly, whose job was to cover stories that were not being covered by the mainstream, the regular daily papers in there. So for me, my entire media career was spent in environments that were advocacy environments. If you think about a place like the Village Voice, it was a place where anyone who was interested in something could write about it from the standpoint of their own experiences. So, the Voice was one of the places that really broke and very aggressively covered the AIDS epidemic long before anyone else was thinking about it. And a lot of the writers, or some of the writers who were writing about HIV were gay or HIV positive. A place like the New York Times, it would be very difficult for a gay writer to, let's say, write about gay and lesbian issues in 1980 something, because there was a definition of objectivity that would make that difficult. But the alternative media space was a space where people were able to tell those kind of stories. So for me, even though obviously it was not an ethnic publication, it's as close as you got working, in one of those places. So, but I guess I haven't answered your question. I think ownership's incredibly important. I think one of the big issues right now is that there's no independent black media that is of the scope of, there's very few independent black media that's national in scope. There's a lot of ad hoc independent media, which is, Twitter, Facebook. But the thing about those things is that they're not institutions. When I worked, I was really fortunate. I teach at Loyola Marymount, and I tell my students this all the time. I was really fortunate. I mean, I graduated from college. I was a freelancer. I worked for a bunch of different places. The Voice, I had health insurance at The Voice.
What? That's good.
Yes, exactly. I was part of a union. I mean, like they call us bargaining unit freelancers. And if you wrote a certain number of articles over the course of a year, you got health insurance the next year. I
obviously missed it. I actually came along way too late.
That stuff does not exist anymore. So the idea that you can basically build a career around being a writer, get paid for it, get paid a living wage, it's a lot harder to do that right now. So for me, the Twitter and Facebook and social media are really great megaphones, and they're really great ad hoc devices for delivering messages and connecting people, but they're not really great at building institutions or careers for people. And I don't know where young writers or young editors go in order to either train or be mentored or.
Well, I think that speaks to a great point, because I remember certain writers when I was growing up reading in the newspaper, because my dad was a big newspaper person. He had, the New York Times, he had the LA Times, he had, even the Weekly, he had everything. And I know that when I was younger, there seemed to be more diversity. I always think I always came around that very sliver, that little time where there was like a few more black people in the media. And now it seems to be less, like you see less black people in even alternative media. You see less, or they're not writing about black issues. So I don't know. There might be people who are black who are on alternative presses, but I don't know, because they're not writing about black issues. Like I read some articles about you wrote about hip hop sometimes, and you wrote about black issues.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly wrote about African American film and Caribbean film.
Yes.
I was a film reviewer, and which was a great job. Getting paid to watch movies is an amazing privilege, and now watching movies for free is that. I mean, I never ran the math or the numbers of it, but it's expensive to go to movies. It's expensive, especially you're a young single person.
Yeah.
Being able to go to movies for free, go on dates. So-called dates. Yeah. Like, hey, come to screening with me. So anyway, it was a great social and financial benefit. But those things, those institutions don't exist anymore, just because the media in general, the print media, the amount of business that's done around writing, it's been demolished. I mean, like a lot of those businesses. I mean, this is an old story. I've just moved online, where people essentially work for free. I mean, like the amount of, they talk about immaterial labor, like the amount of immaterial labor that we perform around media, on Facebook, on our blogs, on social media, it's a huge business, but none of us make any money off of it. The owners of the platforms make money. So figuring out how to monetize your ideas and your words, I think, is a lot harder when there are just so many fewer places to sell them to. And so those missing black writers that you're talking about are part of the the body count of the print, the destruction of the print media, shrinking. Even places like TV. There are a lot of places that are hiring fewer and fewer people, and of course last hired first fired is defines a lot of careers of people of color in these industries. So
well. Also, too, in regards to the Eric Garner issue, the Mike Brown issue. I mean, it seemed like to me when they were covering it, even like on TV, it's like they were pulling black people in from who weren't even journalists.
Right.
And I mean, there was one point in time when things would happen, and they would pull a black journalist, they had a black journalist. They don't even have black journalists. They have to get people like a black environmentalist, a black, just random. I think do you think that's hurting coverage?
Yeah, I mean, I think coverage is just terrible overall. So, I mean, it's just coverage of everything is terrible. Mm-hmm. I mean, coverage of everything is terrible. I mean, especially, there are great writers out there. There's still stuff. There's, the paradox of this is that there's a wealth of things to read. Mm-hmm. But the question is, what's the media that most people are consuming? Most people are watching cable TV. They're watching Don Lemon. They're watching, or they're watching, Fox if they're on the other side. And those venues are not built to either mentor or develop, authentic or qualified black voices, but also they're not meant to develop authentic conversation or insight about anything. I mean, like, it's like the television and cable media is just awful. I mean, like, local news is awful. Like, if you look at, local TV news, it's the worst. So most people get their information through that, or, they get it through their Facebook feed. And, your Facebook feed is only as good as your community, you know what I mean? So if you've got a crappy, set of inputs in terms of what people are sharing, then you're going to get a crappy news experience. But I don't know. I mean, I just think it's not a great time to look to these traditional venues for analysis or understanding about what's going on in the world. And actually, the beauty right now of Twitter and of Facebook is that it does allow you to, end run around these institutions and deliver messages. The question then is just that it's hard to build an institution on top of someone else's institution. So if you're a consumer and you're a smart consumer, you can figure something out and you can benefit. If you're a media maker, it's a little bit more complicated. I mean, basically you work for Facebook, you work for Twitter.
And that, that's the kind of the challenge, because I really feel that the Mike Brown incident issue challenge murder in Ferguson, and then you compare it to the Eric Garner, and to me it seemed like on Twitter Mike Brown had a lot more traction. And even though the Eric Garner what happened was horrible, but it didn't seem like that they had as much build up in regards to what happened, in regards to both of them had no indictment, but it seemed like there was a lot more knowledge and information that went out in Ferguson, which was kind of odd, because New York is such a big place. And I feel that I wouldn't have gotten a lot of information had I not been on Twitter. So, like, what can we do to kind of, before you answer that, why do you think there was such a difference between New York and Ferguson? Ferguson's this little city, and New York is huge. Why was such the difference in regards to their social media?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that the experience of a story through social media is a really hard. It's a really hard lens to understand a story, because there's so many things that shape your experience. Like I said, so who are you following? Is your network stronger on people who are feeding stories on one story than another? I think, I'm a New Yorker. I grew up in New York. And so I think, I don't really have a real thesis on this, but I think that people in New York may have had a stronger expectation of justice from the institutions than people in Missouri and St. Louis might have had. And so the tracking of the event, might have been just different in terms of how people related to it. I mean, the presence of incontrovertible video evidence of malfeasance by this police officer it might have put people on a different footing, whereas people in the St. Louis framework, or who were in the fray there, knew that they just had a better sense, I think, of what fight they were fighting. And I think the presence of the video, the feeling that it's New York, might have lulled them a little bit.
And they just kind of assumed, like, oh, of course it's going to be an indictment. Like,
of course, yeah. Either there's going to be an indictment. There's going to be an indictment. What happens after the indictment is an open question. But the thing, this conversation about that video. Rodney King's beating was recorded in full
Yes.
And the presence of the camera had no relationship to justice there. Cameras were welcome participants in lynchings for the entire history of photography in the United States. There's a sideline that involves people photographing lynchings, making postcards out of them, sharing them, photographing themselves, like partying. People describe like lynchings as being the carnival-like aspect of lynchings, well documented in photographs. So the presence of a camera is not. It's just a box. Like, it has no inherent relationship to justice, and the idea that because there's a camera there you're going to get justice is an incredibly naive point of view. Not just about whatever, like the philosophy of what a camera is and what an image is, but also about the people who are looking at these images. I mean, again, the camera, these grand juries, you could put a body cam on every single cop in this country, and if grand juries are mainly composed of people who don't believe that black and brown people are human, then they're going to be like, well, yeah, I didn't see what you saw in that video. So
no, it is very true. It's like, the same reason that cops were like, oh, well, he was threatening. He was threatening to me. They're going to see the exact same thing.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think that I guess you and the earlier callers were talking about this idea of reform versus revolution, or reform versus dismantling. The system, our system of justice, cannot be reformed. It needs to be transformed in some way. And to be honest, I don't know what that involves. I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I'm not a political scientist, and I'm not. And also, I having worked on a lot of community products, I'm actually a little. Well, you might have heard this in some of my some things I say about Twitter or Facebook. I'm a little skeptical about what, at the end of the day, these platforms do for us around these topics, because, they're always been ad hoc or informal communication platforms. They weren't necessarily digital, or they made it. There's always been ways for the word to get around to where it needed to go. People are smart. People have intuitive and immediate understandings of like the information around them, of situations. You don't need, an app on your phone to do that. So whether, well, it helps, I guess. But I don't know. I feel a little bit pessimistic, because I really don't understand. And when I say I don't understand, I'm talking to myself here. I don't understand how to move forward from our sort of current predicament, because unless I'll give you an example. One of the things that I've noticed a lot in my feeds, at least, and this might just reflect my network, is Christopher Dorner. The number of references to Christopher Dorner that I see, let's say, and I haven't run these numbers or scrubbed this data, but I feel like there's been an uptick of people referencing Christopher Dorner, and I think about what that means. For Angelinos, that's that moment was a crazy moment.
Yes.
And so for that story to still be circulating the way it is, and for people to be reconsidering or recirculating his claims and charges in this current moment, means that we live in a moment where people's anger and frustration has it's got unpredictable possibilities. You know what I mean? Like, and so I've seen a couple people who've changed their icons to Christopher Dorner, and some people do stuff like that. One of the things about the internet is that it's it's cheap. Certain gestures are cheap. I mean, just download and push a button, and you've made your statement. But I don't know. It's just an interesting moment, and I don't know exactly what is going to happen moving forward, because the cop who shot the 12-year-old in Cleveland, I would be incredibly surprised if that guy is indicted. we've seen it's incredibly difficult at the structure of law to prosecute cops in this country. I mean, like I forget what the principle is called, but this notion of reasonableness that a cop who feels reasonably, who has a reasonable fear of for his life is allowed to use deadly force. And if you're like a racist or an idiot, like your reasonable is a racist or an idiot's reasonable. You know what I mean? So the issue is that we need the infrastructure of law, like the constitutional principles. There's a whole infrastructure that needs to be shifted, and I don't know. That's a long fight. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what the institutions are who do that. I mean, you talk about iconic moments in history, like Brown versus Board of Ed. You talk about the role of the traditional, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and these kind of institutions and these conversations. I don't know who is out there right now trying to change the legal infrastructure that allows, this to happen. And then I don't even know how it gets changed after, after both the House and the Senate are in Republican hands, like state houses across the country.
Yeah, Republicans swept everything.
I mean, so
I just threw things at the TV.
You think what?
I just threw things at the TV.
Yeah. No, it's been a incredibly depressing couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how can we? I guess my challenge with there's the Constitution, and we have that, and we have the Constitution, and you kind of go, if they followed the Constitution, these things wouldn't happen. But then I think this Constitution also is the same Constitution that enslaved my ancestors. Right. So I mean, it's kind of like, is this Constitution working the way it's supposed to work, or is it not working? Is this what's supposed to be happening? It's like it's all like a joke on us.
Right.
It's
it's a highly it's a terrible joke. It's a highly complicated joke that requires a lot of years invested in undoing, and so I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. That's kind of downer answer that you were.
no, it's not a downer answer.
I think you wanted something more stirring from me. I think more, but I have no idea. I really have no idea.
I mean, okay. In regards to, because we're about to wrap this up.
Okay.
Sadly, we're gonna wrap this up, but
I'm sorry. I was late, so I shortchanged myself.
You shortchanged yourself. That's right, because you're kind of a new dad now. So
I am a new dad. I am, my little guy Toussaint.
Yes, he's adorable.
He is a good little man. We gave him my family's Haitian.
Yes.
And my relatives we didn't realize you were so Haitian.
Yeah,
They're like, you named your kid Toussaint? What?
I was going to ask you about that.
They were totally baffled. I mean, the people who gave me the weirdest looks were all my Haitian aunts and uncles. Yeah. Because they're like, wow, we didn't know you were so,
you're like
into it.
You call it like, I've gone back to my roots.
I got to say, I'm from the East Coast, and there's not a lot of Haitians in LA.
No.
So my son is an Angelino, and, his mom's Colombian. And so I basically, I tattooed him with his Haitian heritage and that name, which no one can pronounce in Los Angeles because there's not enough French speakers.
Yeah, but, I'm always messing up people's names. I'm like like Dauphine.
I
don't. What is it? What, am I saying it wrong?
You can say. I say this is a subject for another show. But when I was growing up, I used to Englify my name or whatever, so I would say Dauphin.
Oh.
Because having people, you say, my name's. Well, I had many issues as a child. One, I was like, I've got a sort of English language first name, Gary.
Yeah.
And then I have a French last name, Dauphin.
Yeah.
And so I, as a very young boy, kind of weird, was like, I need a name that's both one language. On both French, so I want to change my name to Paul, because you can say Paul Dauphin without in one language,
Yeah.
So, but then I got older, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna force everyone to pronounce my name in French.
Yeah.
And I still mostly do that, but it's like when you're calling the phone company or something, and they're just like, what? And I'm just like, people get Dauphin. So anyway, Toussaint Dauphin is gonna he's gonna have to learn how to navigate this on his own. Maybe he can listen to the show and try to get some
get his advice.
Some advice. He was like, my parents were so weird, but yeah, no. I'll say I love that guy. I mean, I say, I don't know. I love being a dad. It's like by far the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah, and it probably gives you at least it gives you hope. That
it does. It does.
Yeah. So
it also makes me terrified.
Oh yeah, I guess I can make it. It can make you terrified, but it's your kid, so it's like a little you.
He's
you could do
me.
it. You could do
He's
it over again. He looks so much like you. It's very odd. It's very strange.
He's he
like you had that baby by yourself.
This is an evolutionary thing. It's like the evolution makes your kids look like the dad to chill them out.
Yeah.
Because I know he's mine. Because how do I really know, really?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm Carolyn. Yeah. You didn't hear that, but how do you really know? I mean, unless you're like a biologist and you got a lab, you run a test. You don't really know. So he looks. I know. He looks like me.
Yeah, that's the only person that could belong to. But I thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Godfather of Black Twitter.
No. I can't take any credit for that. I will say this. If you want to say, the early African American internet, I did. The
early African American internet. That's right.
Run the bases.
Yeah, like I said, I'm pretty sure. I gotta remember what my old username is, so you can remember who I am.
Those pages are still there. I logged into Black Planet recently, and I found my old page. So you can actually find your own page if you're so.
Okay, I think I'll do that. I found my old live journal. I'm Blythe Satire on live journal from a long time ago. Thank you everyone. Stay alert, stay active, keep going. Keep reading media that people get paid to do.
Yes.
In addition to because that's important. We can't keep doing this for free, or for very little money. We need to eat and things. So that's why I'm getting so skinny. All right. So Richard, thank you so much. Richard's my engineer. And thank you, Gary, for coming on the show. We very much appreciate you. And thank you, Marie Holt, for calling. And thank you, Sharon, for calling in. And we hope to get some more call-in segments soon. I will see you next week. And you probably shouldn't spend any money this holiday season. Show America that we don't appreciate how they're acting. Again, this is Atika Lark Fleming with the MPC Presents the Black Girl Show.
They say I'm different 'cause I'm a piece of sugar cane. And then I'll kick my legs, I got rhythm. My great-grandpa was a blues lover. He be rocking his moonshine to Baby King and Jimmy Ray. Rock on that.
We know there are many choices of internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.